Hey, it's Sela Social Studies.
Hey guys, welcome back to Sheila Social Studies. All right, so today we're going to be talking about the progressive presidents. Now, there are three presidents who are commonly associated with the progressive era in the United States, and they are Theodore Teddy Roosevelt, the cousin of later President Franklin Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, and Woodrow Wilson. While the three men shared some antitrust sentiments, they all had very different ideas how to reform the nation. Americans believed that this was a time of big government in the United States. Gone was the practice of laissez faire capitalism, or the idea that the government was quote unquote hands off business, because during the progressive era, the government began to have its hands all over business and would place regulations on businesses and some say American lives. So, who was the first progressive president? Well, in September 1901, President William McKinley was assassinated, and his vice president, Theodore Roosevelt, was thrust into the office of the presidency. Roosevelt grew up in a wealthy family and believed that the wealthy needed to help serve the nation. Roosevelt closely followed the stories of the muckrakers and demanded change. President Roosevelt created a reform policy to aid in fixing societal issues, and he named it the Square Deal. Even though the plan was called the Square Deal, the plan truly revolved only around three major goals that were called the three C's. Roosevelt would use the policy first by ending the coal miners' strike in 1902. Roosevelt threatened that the federal government would take over the mines unless managers agreed to arbitration, which was a formal process for settling disputes with the strikers. We hear arbitration today in the sports world when players will enter arbitration with their team to settle a contract, including salary negotiations. Now, a square has four sides and a triangle has three, so I tell my students to remember the fourth C. And President Roosevelt was a crusader. That's my fourth C, which is a person who campaigns vigorously for political control or societal change. And this is what Roosevelt did. That was one C. He a crusader. Now, there are three other C's, and they are as follows. Roosevelt wanted to control the corporations, help consumers, and conserve national lands and its wildlife. Roosevelt wanted to control the corporations. President Roosevelt was the first president to successfully use the 1890 Sherman Antitrust Act to break up a monopoly. The Sherman Antitrust Act was a law that was put in place that prohibited businesses from trying to destroy its competition or create monopolies or trusts. In 1904, President Roosevelt urged his Justice Department to dismantle the Northern Securities Corporation, which was a monopoly on a group of railroads administered by a board of trustees that included J.P. Morgan and John D. Rockefeller. They held a monopoly on railroads in Midwest and Northern Pacific railroads. The United States government won the case, and the Northern Securities Corporation was dismantled. Roosevelt then urged Congress to regulate railroad shipping rates. This case paved the way for another 43 antitrust suits throughout Roosevelt's presidency, earning him the nickname the Trust Buster. Roosevelt did not wind up busting all trusts, however. He believed that some trusts were good for the country and would only bust the trusts that he believed were bad for the United States. While Roosevelt was crushing the corporations and breaking up monopolies and trusts, he was also helping the consumer. When the government broke up trusts and monopolies, it helped consumers by lowering prices on goods and services. Roosevelt would also help consumers with their health. Upon reading the book The Jungle by famous muckraker Upton Sinclair, Roosevelt urged Congress to pass meat inspection laws and supported the passing of the Pure Food and Drug Act in 1906. The combination of these laws made it illegal to manufacture, sell, and transport mislabeled or contaminated food and drugs. The American public largely supported the government's expansion of federal regulatory powers. Roosevelt is truly remembered for the last C of the square deal, conservation. Historically, Roosevelt is remembered as being an avid outdoorsman, hunter, and fighter, a manly man. He supported the idea of conservation, which is the protection of all nature and its resources, and he considered it a national priority. There are numerous types of conservationists or preservationists. Preservationists truly wanted to protect nature to save its beauty from harmful human activities, while conservationists wanted to be sure that the nation used its natural resources efficiently. Roosevelt did a combination of both. While in office, Roosevelt conserved the United States by doubling the size of the National Park Service, establishing 5 new national parks to preserve the land, and established the United States Forest Service to conserve it. He issued 100 million acres of land to the Forest Service to regulate the use of forest resources by businesses. In the 1906 Antiquities Act, Roosevelt created 18 national monuments and also created 51 bird sanctuaries. The amount of land that Roosevelt placed under protection totaled over 200 million acres. So after Theodore Roosevelt served his 2 terms in office, he decided not to run for a third. This created an avenue for the Secretary of War and ally to Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, to run for office. Taft was elected president in 1908 and agreed with many of his predecessors' beliefs about trust. President Taft was also a trust buster, busting up to 70 trusts in only 4 years. While he moved more cautiously towards reform and regulation, he busted all trusts. Unlike Roosevelt, who felt some trusts were good for the nation, Taft wanted to bust them all for the good of the American consumers. In 1909, Taft signed the Payne-Aldrich tariff that raised prices for consumers. This angered many progressives, and they ultimately would turn on Taft in the next election. Even though Taft would lose the next presidential election, his presidency in life has been known to have some firsts and tall tales. It was well known that Roosevelt was setting up Taft to be his successor. This led Taft to be well liked among the political elites, and after Taft's defeat of the presidency, he was selected to be the 10th Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. He is still the only person in U.S. history to hold both the position of President and Chief Justice. Taft was also a large man who struggled with his weight, weighing over 330 pounds. Rumors have it that Taft was so big that he got stuck in the presidential bathtub. While there was a larger tub brought into the White House to accommodate Taft, which fit 4 full-grown men, and there is no evidence that Taft actually got stuck in the tub. So come the election of 1912. After Taft's first term in office, he ran for re-election as the Republican candidate in 1912. While being the president, Theodore Roosevelt became angry at Taft with his conservative platform and busting every trust, and ran for president himself under a new political party named the Bull Moose Party. In total, there were 4 men who ran for president that year, all reformers: the Republican Taft, Bull Moose Roosevelt, Socialist Eugene V. Debs, and Democrat Woodrow Wilson. When Roosevelt split to the Bull Moose Party, he effectively split the Republican parties in 2 between himself and Taft. When a political party splits its voters in half, it will always lose. The Democrat Woodrow Wilson was elected president by a wide margin. Even though Woodrow Wilson received only 42% of the popular vote, the other 3 candidates split the other 58%. Clearly, America was ready for a new path towards reform. President Woodrow Wilson had his own domestic reform plan that he put into place called the New Freedom. It was Wilson that introduced the 16th Amendment of gradual income tax in 1913, the same year that he passed the Federal Reserve Act, which created a national banking system. Wilson wanted to control the banks, and in 1913 he created a Federal Reserve System that controlled the money supply and affected the value of the currency, which would help regulate inflation. Wilson also pushed for laws that would regulate big business. In 1914, Wilson signed the Clayton Antitrust Act, which enhanced the previous Sherman Antitrust Act. Wilson believed that the Clayton Act would better control in preventing the creation of trusts. That same year, Wilson created the Federal Trade Commission, or the FTC, which had the power to investigate and punish unfair trade practices. The combination of the Clayton Antitrust Act and the creation of the Federal Trade Commission was a part of Wilson's progressive domestic plan that again helped consumers by regulating corporations. All right, guys, I'll see you next time when we talk more about the Progressive Era.